Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Bob Weeks. The address is 2451 Regency Lakes Court in Wichita. The Kansas Open Records Act, the law of the state of Kansas, states, "It is declared to be the public policy of the state that public records shall be open for inspection by any person unless otherwise provided by this act, and that this act shall be liberally construed and applied to promote such policy." But in my recent experience, our city's legal staff has decided to act contrary to this policy. It's not only the spirit of this law that the city is violating, but also the letter of the law as well. Recently, I made requested some records from the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation. Although the WDDC cooperated and gave me the records I requested, the city denies that the WDDC is a public agency as defined in the Kansas Open Records Act. This is an important issue to resolve. In the future, requests may be made for records for which the WDDC may not be willing to cooperate. In this case, citizens will have to rely on compliance with the law, not voluntary cooperation. Or other people may make records requests and may not be as willing as I have been to pursue this matter. Additionally, citizens may want to attend WDDC's meetings under the provisions of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Furthermore, there are other organizations similarly situated. These include the Greater Wichita Economic Development Coalition and the Go Wichita Convention and Visitors Bureau. These organizations should also properly be ruled public agencies as defined in the Kansas Open Records Act so that citizens and journalists may freely request their records and attend their meetings. Now, here's why the WDDC is a public agency and subject to the Open Records Act. In defining, the Open Records Act says public agency means the state or any political or taxing subdivision of the state or any office, officer, agency, or instrumentality thereof, or any other entity receiving or expending and supported in whole or in part by public funds appropriated by the state or by public funds of any political or taxing subdivision of the state. And at the Kansas Attorney General's office, there's some additional guidelines which conclude it is some office or agency that is connected with state or local government. Now, the WDDC is wholly supported by a special property tax district, plain and simple. That is the entire source of their funding, except for some private fundraising done only this year. Now, the city cites an exception under which organizations are not subject to the Kansas Open Records Act, and that states any entity solely by reason of payment from public funds for property, goods, or services of such entity. Now, the purpose of this exception is so that, let's say if the city buys an automobile, the car dealer is not subject to the Open Records Act simply because it sold a car to the city. But this statute contains an important qualifier, the word solely. And now in this case, the relationship between the City of Wichita and the WDDC is not that of solely customer and vendor. Instead, the city created a special tax district that is the source of substantially all of WDDC's revenue. And the existence of that district must be renewed by the city soon. The WDDC performs a governmental function that some cities decide to keep in-house. The WDDC has only one customer, to my knowledge, that being the City of Wichita. And furthermore, the revenue that the WDDC receives each year is dependent on the property tax collected in the special taxing district. The only reasonable conclusion to draw is that in terms of both funding and function, the WDDC is effectively a branch of Wichita city government. The refusal of the city's legal department to acknowledge these facts and concede that the WDDC is a public agency stands reason on its head. It's also contrary to the expressly stated public policy of the state of Kansas. It's an intolerable situation that cannot be allowed to exist. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, it doesn't take a liberal application of the Kansas Open Records Act to correct this situation. All that is required is to read the law and follow it. That's what I'm asking this body to do. Ask the city legal department to comply with the clear language and intent of the Kansas Open Records Act. I'd be happy to answer questions if there are.
Gary, is WDDC an entity of the City of Wichita?
No, sir, it is not. The WDDC is not a public agency that is supported by public funds. The city contracts with the WDC to provide services to the downtown Wichita Self-Supported Improvement District. and the city provides has that contract with what's called the SMID. The WDDC is a private, not-for-profit entity, and the city is not the custodian of their records. So Mr. Weeks' analysis is not accurate.
Are we following the law as the open meetings law presents itself?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, the city is in compliance with the open records law.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Question for Gary now. What part of is there anything within that realm that is public information?
There is information regarding their financials. That information is provided by all nonprofits that have some connection, and so that information is available from the WDDC, but it's important to note the city is not the custodian of the WDDC's records, and we have not shared any records that they may have given us with the City Council, so therefore under the open records law, Mr. Weeks or anybody else wanting those records would go to the WDDC as the custodian of the records. Since we're not the custodian, we're not the party that turns over the records.
Okay. Question for Mr. Weeks is that have you had any problems with getting the financial records? Have you asked for them?
The only request I've made, the WDC did cooperate voluntarily, yes.
Okay. You have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think, this isn't Mr. Riebensdorf's interpretation is only one that a lawyer could love, and, the Open Records Act says this should be liberally construed. That's the public policy of the state of Kansas. So, and, the WDDC, while they may cooperate voluntarily, their position is they rely on Mr. Riebensdorf's interpretation that they are not a public agency. And then there's also the other two agencies that I mentioned as well. So, I expect this issue will not die here today. Thank you.
Thank you.